What's going on, everybody? This is going to be part one of our series on how to case mod your Xbox One console. As you can see here, we have a top shell piece for the Xbox One. Today we're going to be showing you how to, in part one I should say, we're going to be showing you how to cut out a window mod using one of these guys right here. Dremel tool with the steel cutting bit attachment, as well as the rotary cutting attachment, which screws right on top like this. I've also got a pencil and a ruler, and what we're going to start out with first is we're just going to be marking off the window here. So let's get going. What I typically would do, you want to leave enough room on this. And also, let me show you this real quick. To give you some stability while you cut, I've got the motherboard shell right here. You obviously don't want to have the top part on it, because as you're cutting, you'll cut all into the top part. And that's not good, especially considering it's metal and the bit that we're using is not good for metal. Obviously, too, you want to empty. You don't want all that crap going inside of your console, and plus you'd hit all kinds of things while you cut if you left the motherboard in there. Now, the other thing I was going to say is, right here, as you can see, it's got some little lips and stuff. These are for both stability, and several of these are where the actual case screws sit, to give it some more stability. So we want to try to leave as much of these little pillar things intact as we can, but we are going to be taking some of them out, obviously, right here. We just don't want to take out too many, especially so that it won't weaken up this, because if this gets unstable, it won't have good connection with your exhaust fan, and the fan will start to exhaust hot air back into the console. So we definitely want to try to leave this lip going along this side right here. I mean, you can take it out. It'll probably be mostly okay, but I like to try to keep things in as good a shape as possible. That way, your console's a little bit older, maybe a little bit worn out, maybe it's got a little bit of heating issues. Leaving that in there will help prolong everything. So we'll flip this back over. Get it kind of on there as best as we can. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take my ruler, and I'm just going to measure an inch off of each edge, because we're just going to be doing a simple cut for this tutorial. Obviously, probably a lot of you might be interested in some kind of crazy design and stuff like that, but it's going to be much easier for this tutorial to show it to you this way. Now, when I go an inch off of this back, it actually has like a bevel right here. So you want to start the inch from this part right here, not from the back of the case, but from where it starts to flatten out right here. And like I said, all I'm doing is I'm just measuring. I'm doing 2 lines on each side, that way we can actually get a straight line here and we mark it back off. Alright, and then we're just going to take those lines that we made, and also you're going to want to use pencil. I said I had a pencil, but I forgot to mention why. Pens are not probably going to show up, and marker is a bad idea, because depending on what you want to do with a case, I mean, more than likely you're going to end up having to sand marks out of your case. Even with the pencil, you got to kind of really mark it in there. All I'm doing is just getting it lined up on each of the 2 lines we made, so I can get a nice straight line. So, with that, that's where we're going to cut it out. You could go in further. You could definitely, I would stay at least an inch off of here and here, because there's some stuff in here that'd be a pain to cut through, and it's really cutting into your, right where there's some stabilizing stuff for the disk drive. But on these sides, you can definitely have it come in a little bit closer. Just remember that that fan ridge we talked about probably comes about, let's see, where does it come? It goes about right here underneath. So you don't want to go any further than that because you don't want to cut that out. Alright, let me set this stuff aside. Now all we're going to do is we're going to cut it. I'll give you a couple tips before we start. If this is the first time you've ever cut this before, definitely take your time. I've actually seen the Dremel use two different ways. You can use this attachment, or they have these little discs, and they spin around like this, and you would just chop it down into there. It would kind of go like this, and you would chop it down in there. But I don't like that because it's really not meant for plastic, and those wheels are kind of dangerous. They chip and break and shatter and fly up all over the place. I just don't like that. So I wouldn't recommend it unless you've got some serious face protective equipment, just to be safe. But using this method, I think, is the best, but it does have its drawbacks. While you're cutting, especially when you get to a point where all those ridges we saw, say we're cutting right here and we run into one of those ridges, it'll make you do this when you cut. And then most of the time, that's going to end up making your cut go like this. Now, if you've got a pretty steady hand and if you're taking it slow, it shouldn't be too bad. But the big problem with that is when you, we're cutting this out. If you hit one of those ridges and it makes you cut way in here, I mean, obviously it wouldn't make you cut that far before you stop, but it could go in like a little bit, and that'll kind of mess up the design, and then you'll have to sand it out, and it's a lot of extra work. So definitely take your time, don't rush it. I'm probably going to do this way faster than what you should, and even still I'm going to be going slower than I usually do, just so you guys get an idea of what I'm trying to say here. So all we're going to do is we're just going to get a start point. We're going to start, the great thing about this is you can just drill it down in there. So we're just going to drill it down in there, get it lined up with the hole. Now, don't cut right on this line, because we're going to come back with a sanding attachment and straighten the lines up, because it's not going to be straight after you cut it. Now, if you really want these corners to be perfectly square, then you won't be able to really use the sanding attachment like you'd like to, because that sanding attachment will round these corners out, and that's just the way it is because it's a big circle, and you can't make a square with a circle. So if you do want to do that, you will manually have to cut this corner out, and then you'd have to hand sand it with a piece of sandpaper to smooth those edges up. So just keep that in mind. But for mine, I like to keep it a little bit rounded anyways. I think it just looks a little bit better, and it makes the sanding process easier. our window. Now, as you can see, this thing, well, maybe you can't see it actually, I shouldn't say that. This attachment scuffs this up like crazy, and for me that's okay because I hate that they put this gloss finish on there. I haven't bought an Xbox One yet that didn't have this terrible scratched up looking cover on it. I mean, it really does. It looks terrible. I've never seen one that looks like it's in real good shape. So don't worry about that when you see it, because we are going to come back with a palm sander and sand this off. And if you're planning on doing any painting, obviously you'd want to do that anyways. But the cool thing about that is it's okay we take the finish off, because if you look at the rest of it, I mean, this doesn't have a shiny finish. Part of the faceplate doesn't. The sides don't. So it's still going to match your console even if you don't paint it. Now, the other thing I want you to notice is if you're not trying to get a perfect square, don't cut with the Dremel all the way into the corner. Kind of cut out early and round the corner out yourself. That way when you come back with that sander, you can round that corner out on your own. Otherwise you're going to find yourself kind of caught up and not able to get it to look right. Alright, so what we're going to do now is we're going to start sanding. So we're going to take this off, and then we're going to remove the cutting bit. This is the little sanding bit I was talking about. See how it's round? That's why it'd be very hard. Now there's also two sizes of these. This is the bigger size. Now hold on, let me see if I can actually. And then this one is the smaller size. The problem with the smaller size is it's not as good for getting your line straight, because just because it's smaller, it tends to want to cut in, and it's really easy to dig into it. So the bigger one is better for this, but if you want corners that are a little bit less rounded, come back with the smaller one, and that is what I'm going to do, is I'm going to use this smaller bit for the corners. Alright, so we got that attached. All we're really doing here is this is kind of just a feel thing. You're just going to, this is also why we didn't do it right up against our line that we marked. We're just going to sand it up to that line. We're just going to do long motions here. Don't sit in one place for too long or you'll end up digging into the case. So you just want to, good solid motions like this. Now, not quite that big, but you don't want to just sit here like this sanding. You at least want to be like this. Alright, so let's get this going. I went messed up. I totally forgot a part we have to do first. Okay. This is going to help you both when you sand the edges and when you install the plexiglass. But you can see here all these little leftover ridges that were going this way and one this way will get in the way. Both when you're sanding, it's going to make it harder, because when you're trying to sand in that one place, it's going to force you to have to stay there, and that could cause you to dig into the case. And obviously with them big ridges, you're not going to be able to install plexiglass either, so it's good to go ahead and knock these out now. could probably see there, all I was really doing was just flatten them out. Now, this part we are going to need to remove some, but you're going to have to be very careful here because you cannot take these whole clips out. The point where it's at its highest is where that comes in and clips on. Now we can still take out the back end of these and get some space for our plexiglass, but do not take these whole things out or your console will never fit together like it's supposed to again. So all we're going to do is we're going to make sure and leave these tallest points, and then we're going to come back. Now we're not going to go all the way back to those tallest points. We're going to leave a little bit there too so it has something extra to snag to lay flat on top of. But we are going to take out about maybe quarter to a half an inch. Now this is also why I leave an inch, especially on this front, because if you went too much further in, you'd have to sand too much of this stuff off and you wouldn't be able to get plexiglass in there. There we go. Now, as you can see, hopefully, this is a pretty decent camera, so hopefully all this is showing up. I didn't cut it all off, but you've got about a half an inch of flat space here now, which is more than enough to get your plexiglass in there comfortably. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and go back to the whole... Now, hold on, let me make sure you'll be able to see me as I turn these. Okay, let's see. You kinda will, kinda won't. This case is kinda big for my area here, so just bear with me. You may not be able to totally see how I'm smoothing it, but I am just doing the same thing I did on this side. Alright, now as you can see, kind of cleaning it up. Still staying out of the corners because we're going to use that, the smaller one. But just long fluid motions here, never staying in one place too long. That helps to keep the heat down so you're not melting it more than you're sanding it. And it also helps it make it easier so you can actually get straight lines here. Okay, sorry about that. That's one line was giving me a little bit of trouble getting it just right. Okay, so let me empty this out. Make it a little bit easier for you to hopefully see that the lines are pretty straight. Now we're going to come in with the smaller sanding attachment, which is going to make it to where we get into these corners, because we didn't do that part. You can use that for the corners, but since the Xbox One is a little bit more square, I don't want it to be too rounded in the corners. I don't think it really looks right. Now with the Xbox 360, it was very rounded with the round face plate. I think the bigger rounded corners on those do look better. It's really just about your preference more than anything else. Now, actually before I start, if you remember I said these smaller ones can dig in, so you're going to have to be real careful, take it easy, because you don't want to come in here just trying to fix a little bit, just, you're almost done now, trying to fix this corner, and then you get a little bit too hasty, and then you dig into the side of it, and you basically have to resand the whole thing. So, just be careful. So I'm pretty happy with that. I did accidentally dig into, which corner was it? Actually, was it this one? I think it was this one. I actually did dig it into the corner a little bit here, so I kind of had to flush that up a little bit, just like we had talked about. So now this is another good example why I keep it an inch off, because the way this case is, the way it comes in like this, that's actually where the Wi-Fi board is. If you go much further in than that, it's going to expose, and then you'll have all this weird open area here, and that kind of, to me, that kind of defeats the purpose of having that window for it to look weird like that. So now all we're going to do is we're going to get a little piece of sandpaper, and we're just going to clean these edges up some more, and that'll be the next step. Let me get my sandpaper. I guess I should have had that before I started the video, huh? Alright, this is 120 grit. Depending on what you want to do, you do want to be careful, because if you come around too flat, you'll end up accidentally sanding the top here. So all we're doing is we're just sanding it, and we are kind of leaning it in this way, because that's going to round off. Okay, so my camera got messed up there. Right there towards the end of the last one, we were just sanding, just smoothing up these edges and rounding off the corners. I'm not going to show you that again because I didn't realize my camera messed up, so I actually finished the rest of it. But that's all you're really doing, kind of a little hack there to even out those edges that were too hard to get absolutely perfect. Then the last step that I thought was being recorded, we actually came in and, you know, as you saw, the finish was totally jacked up. And honestly, before I even started cutting it, it was already really jacked up. So what we are doing is coming in with a palm sander. I have a 400 grit paper on it. So let me plug this in and just show you what I was doing again. All you're doing is you just have to be real light with it. You want to get the finish, basically you want to get all that clear coat finish off of there. And you don't want to go in too deep, because if you want to keep this Xbox logo, which I kind of like to keep those on there, if you sand it too deep, it'll either A, mess it up, or it'll just completely sand it off of there. So you don't want to bear down on this. If you've got a fresh 400 grit sandpaper on your palm sander, it's literally going to just come right off, basically. That finish is not thick at all. So I'm not going to do it again because I already did it. But all you're really doing is you're just going around, just real light. You can kind of see when some of that finish has come off of there. Now, as you can see, though, this is a bit of a different color. It's kind of lighter now. But what I actually do is I throw this thing in the tub and wash it off, and this will get a little bit darker after you do that. Now, it is going to stay a little bit lighter than it was before, but it still matches, and it's still going to be just a tiny bit darker than you see it right now. It's really the only way to work around that terrible, terrible clear finish and that clear coat they put on there. It's just a nightmare to get that looking good besides that. And this is how I sell the kits too. So, along with that, I know this is pretty daunting for some people. You're going to need a palm sander, a Dremel, then the plexiglass stuff and all that. Then later on, for the other parts of the tutorials from the series, you'll need the stuff for the LEDs and soldering and stuff like that. So that's why I now sell these as kits. You can get a case kit just like this one. It'll have a plexiglass installed, which that's going to be part 2 of our tutorial series. But it'll have that installed. It'll come with an LED kit pre-made, so you'll be able to do it all right then. And all you have to do is you have to check down in the description of this video, and you'll find some links for that stuff. If you're watching this video on our website, you can just scroll down a little bit further and you'll get some more info on some of those kits if that's what you're more interested in. And this is basically exactly what you're going to get right here too. So anyways, guys, tune in for part 2 where we're going to cut and install the plexiglass. It's not going to be too difficult, but there is some little tricks to it and everything that I want to show you guys. So come on back for part 2.